there was a question on terms of prioritizing between water supply and sewerage systems in a town, given a situation. And one point was made that equal emphasis has to be laid on water supply as well as sewerage.
So emphasis finally comes down to making, like, if you have a given budget, what do you spend it on?
Exactly, a prioritization in terms of investments in projects. So you would take monies and invest simultaneously on water supply and sanitation. This seemed to be the recommendation because groundwater is polluted with nitrate in the particular town that was being studied. But perhaps there's a different typology where if water is sourced from a place which is, let's say, 30 or 40 kilometers away from the town itself, and that the groundwater situation in the town is such that the water table is, let's say, 500 or 600 feet, in which case perhaps you would prioritize on drinking water supply much more than on sanitation, because your drinking water source is not threatened by the pollutant load from the sanitation, and the ability of the earth to absorb the sewage is much higher because the groundwater table is lower. So perhaps in these kind of situations you would ensure that water supply has 24/7 pressure and therefore is not contaminated or polluted, and that sewage investments come later as and when the town is able to afford it. And let's remember that sanitation comes at a price. A small town like Mulbagal budgets 22 crores. It has got a population of 50,000 people. This is roughly 4,400 rupees per capita for sewerage, and this is just the capital investment cost.
Then you're saying that
the thing is, what are the alternatives? The alternatives are, say, something like the twin leach pit as a toilet, which would cost anywhere between 8,000 to 10,000 rupees. Now, remember, this 4,400 rupees per capita excludes the construction of the toilet. So the household has to invest in the toilet, and then there's a connection charge, and then 4,400 rupees is being spent. Question is, can we afford it? So if we have to make a decision, I think in towns where the groundwater table is low, you would go in for the household-based toilet systems, be it septic tanks or twin leach pits. However, if there is a shallow aquifer or if there is an aquifer likely to be contaminated, then obviously investments should be in the underground drainage system, because your shallow aquifer would be the cheapest source of water, the most ecological source of water, and perhaps available 24/7 if you have an open well in your house. In which case you would do the reverse. You would invest in sewerage, you would need not invest in water supply.
But if the sewage is going to the groundwater, then obviously that will be polluted.
Yeah, nobody is talking that sewage should not be treated or that sewage will not pollute groundwater. The situation I am describing to you is where groundwater tables are really low, that they are 300, 400, 500 feet below the ground level. So therefore the earth acts as a filter for the sewage itself, for it not to be contaminated. And even if the groundwater is contaminated, it is not a source of water for the town itself. So it has no role to play in the drinking water supply for the town. So obviously this water could be used for non-potable purposes. That's the situation I'm trying to describe.
Just to round out that picture, a couple of things. One is, how does this point that your water pipeline system is typically going to get infected with sewage, even if it's not coming from groundwater, because of the pipelines not being good enough, because of them being old and cracked, that they are going to have infiltration from the sewage.
Typically, unfortunately in India, groundwater-based systems are not chlorinated. Surface water-based systems have chlorine, and therefore there's a residual chlorine of 0.2 milligrams per liter left, which takes care of any microbiological contamination in the water. So therefore, though there are hardly 1 or 2 towns in India which get 24/7 water supply, still in towns where drinking water supply is treated with chlorine, you do not have epidemics, or you do not have microbiology-based diseases occurring. So it's just a question of chlorinating the water. Of course, a good practice would be to ensure fully pressurized water supply in the pipes 24/7, so that no contaminant enters the water supply system. Still, the emphasis lies not on sewerage as much as on good distribution networks and good rising mines and good pipelines which would not be contaminated, and good chlorination also. So that's the way to take care of contamination within pipes. That's what one feels.
And what's the response to the point that deep water tables are being tapped nowadays just because of the water scarcity? So So contamination is an issue there.
Well, contamination could be an issue, but even now, if the town does not have a shallow aquifer, then there is a propensity for the earth to be able to absorb sewerage and sanitation of a certain load. That load should be marked and utilized appropriately. What people do is to dig deep pits and let the waste go into it. They do not reuse the nutrients. The twin leach pit would be shallow, would therefore have less propensity to contaminate. It would only be about 1.2 meters deep. It would be repeatedly removed. The nutrients would be removed so that they don't stay permanently in the earth, constantly leaching into the groundwater table. And the nutrients would be used as fertilizer in the field. So there is a difference between what's happening now and its improvement into what would be the twin leach pit model. And obviously the twin leach pit model would be much better. But it would be an affordable form of sanitation or sewerage for the town.
Really please, yeah.
You're talking about the modified leach pit toilet, because presently they have only the pit toilets.
Correct.
Which is contaminating the groundwater.
Correct.
If you want to make that change, so that will be a major task, and that will also require investment. So should it come along with the water supply, or it's?
Yeah, there are two costs to a toilet. There is a superstructure cost, which has already been invested. There is a toilet structure, and it's a substructure cost. What happens in a twin leach pit is you dig a pit which is about 0.9 meters in diameter and 1.2 meter deep. Digging a pit is not costly at all. You have two pits so that you alternate between the two. And you have a pour flush pan which is steeply sloping and which requires 2 liters per flush. That pour flush pan costs 180 rupees. So the modification per se is not a costly affair. It can be done in something like 1,000 rupees. And if in 1,000 rupees you're able to avoid contamination of your shallow aquifer, why not resort to that? Why invest huge sums of money on underground sewerage system and then be dependent on O&M costs, electricity costs to maintain it, rather than on systems which are simpler and which can be maintained more easily? That's the whole idea.